Right, falling house prices, good or bad? Depends if you want to buy a house, Liam.
I'm an economist on the one hand, on the other. That's why Napoleon said, give me a one-handed economist. It depends what end of the telescope you're looking through, doesn't it? We are seeing we are seeing the biggest house price falls since 2007 and 8, since the global financial crisis, since the worst economic calamity.
Because of interest rates going up, Liam.
Since the Great Depression. Because of lack of demand, because consumer confidence is being hammered by 14 interest rate rises here in the UK. Just before we get on to house prices, literally as you've been talking there, I've seen what are called the PMI numbers. These are like preliminary GDP numbers, preliminary growth numbers. They're not official numbers. They're surveys of businesses around the country. They're absolutely terrible. The manufacturing PFI has fallen to 42.7. 50 is growth. And the manufacturing PFI has plunged to 42.7. The services PMI, which covers 4/5 of the economy, that's also now well below 50. So it seems to me the Bank of England...
Is this a measure of confidence?
It's not only a measure of confidence, Andrew. It's a detailed survey of business leaders and investors about where they see... The economy going in the next month, and it translates directly into decisions about investment, decisions about employment.
Send this to the Bank of England. You're going to put
what
up interest rates again?
July to August. It's month on month.
Right.
I've just tweeted, as I have for months now, since April. I've been saying the Bank of England should pause because it's
no more interest rate
driving the economy into a recession. Not needed, because the Bank of England is so determined to salvage battered credibility because it was so late to get rate rises going in the first place, because it kept saying inflation was transitory and ignoring those of us who were warning them in 2020 and 2021.
And in the last quarter, the debt levels were nothing like as high as the official bodies predicted.
That's right, because the blob has such a negative view of the British economy. Some people would say they, of course, would deny that. But let's go back to what I was actually going to... I'd like to weigh in on the last discussion as well.
Of course you would.
We'll leave that for another time, maybe over a drink or something. Look, when house prices go down and earnings go up, there's an improvement in what's called the affordability ratio. The affordability ratio is the price of the average home compared to the average wage. And you can look at in England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, across the economy as a whole. That number, according to the Nationwide, we can get this up on a graphic actually, that average UK home to earnings ratio is now 6.7 times, OK? And that's historically lower. It's down from, I guess the graphic isn't there, it's down from 7.3 times last year. But because we've had 14 interest rate rises since December 2001, even though the price-earnings ratio has fallen, people's ability to actually buy the house, unless they're a cash buyer, has diminished. And so this price-earnings ratio does not capture the price of borrowing. And let's be completely clear, the house price-to-earnings ratio has fallen from 7.3 to 6.7. Back in the late 90s, it was 3 or 4 times earnings. That meant that a single person, because you can get 3 times your income on a mortgage, could buy an average house. Now, if you're at 6.7, a couple, both of whom are working full-time, they can only borrow 6 times, right? And that's before you take into account childcare. Presumably, a big reason for buying the average home is because you want to have the average family, which is 2.1 kids, right? So even an average couple can't afford an average home on this earnings multiple before you even consider the borrowing costs.
So, look, I'm part of that Thatcher property-owning democracy. I bought my first place, a little tiny terrace in Worcester, for £19,000 when I was 19. Are we going to have to say to Bev's kids, your kids, forget it, you're not going to own a home?
Well, that's what's happening,
which is terrible.
That's what's happening, and yes, that's why I wrote the book Home Truths a few years ago about these issues. This is, for me, housing is the everything problem. So many issues in the UK come back to housing. You know, you want to stop knife crime? Give kids a front door on ground level and a kitchen table where their single mum can watch them do their homework, right? If you want to keep families together, don't have a situation where both parents have to work really full-time, full-on jobs where they have to commute because the housing is so expensive. They have to commute 40 or 50 miles to their place of work.
We've got to move on. One quick question. If individuals are buying houses, who's owning them?
Well, houses are increasingly being bought by institutions, by pension funds, by insurance companies, by corporate landlords.
Who then rent them out.
The problem isn't, You know,
and they're waiting for the asset to go up in price.
Yeah, the problem isn't small-time landlords maybe who own one house
I know.
because pensions have been rubbish over the last 20 or 30 years. They're often kind to their tenants. The problem is big corporate landlords. It's a major problem.
Asset grab,
and just
isn't it,
a lack of housing. We haven't built nearly enough homes in this country.
For years.
For years and years and years, going all the way back to the 80s and the 90s.
The Blair government was terrible.
The Blair government was particularly bad on social housing. It was during the Blair and Brown years that social housing, the building of social housing, council housing, really fell off a cliff. There were years during the Blair-Brown era where we just built less than a couple of hundred council houses across the entire country.
And I bet you Tony Blair's got a finger in some of those pies that are currently buying up thousands of houses.
He would deny that.
How many properties has he got, Tony Blair?
Right.
Is it 42 or 43?
Oh, and the rest.